Welcome back to the Don't Skip the Legal podcast. Today's episode is a little bit different. We're bringing you a special recast of my recent guest appearance on the Lot and Parcel Podcast, hosted by Ben Diaz. Ben and I had a great conversation about the legal landmines that trip up entrepreneurs and business owners, and really how to avoid them. In that episode, we covered why commingling personal and business finances could cost you everything, what happens if you misclassify your workers as contractors, why contracts don't necessarily have to be in writing, but, why they really should be, the FTC's crackdown on non-competes, how to properly protect your intellectual property, trademarks, and domain names, and why ignoring FinCEN, the Financial Crime Enforcement Network's new rules, could land you in hot water. So whether you're just getting started on your own or scaling up your business, this episode is packed with practical, real-world legal advice to help protect and grow your business. All right, so let's dig in. I'm Andy Contiguglia, your corporate casual Denver-based business attorney, bringing you the Don't Skip the Legal podcast, where you can listen in on the real stories, the real stakes, and the real legal lessons from real business owners just like you. These behind-the-door conversations about business are instrumental to your success. This is where the deals are made, negotiations are discussed, and company problems are identified, leading you to overcoming the challenges we all face in our business. This podcast is your invitation to where the real business happens, and also where the best ideas take place. So let's get behind the doors in business and break down these legal lessons. And overall, remember, don't skip the legal.
Welcome to your Lot and Parcel Podcast. You will find this program to have your best interest at heart. You can help us to continue this library of educational topics to help you preserve your home and family. As a nonprofit organization, we would appreciate your monetary support. Here is your host, Benjamin F. Diaz.
My guest today believes that business owners can be more successful in their business if they maintain a more detailed understanding of the legal issues they may encounter while running their businesses. Therefore, he's providing original strategies for business proprietors. He is a business attorney who has captured the attention of many media outlets such as Business.com, 5280 Magazine, Epic Times, CBS News Denver, and many others. Let's welcome this counselor to our show, and here he is, Andrew J. Contiguglia. Thank you, Andrew, for joining me today. I appreciate you taking time to speak about startups, business that, you find many folks that are out there maybe sitting on the fence and not quite know how to begin to get into a new business, but I'm very grateful. But before we get into that topic, Andrew, give us a little bit of an overview, your field of discipline, and I understand you also authored a book entitled Don't Skip the Legal, which I'm intrigued by that. So tell us about the impetus of that as well.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Ben. I really
Sure.
appreciate this opportunity to be on your show. And I really hope that your listeners get this opportunity to sort of pick up some of the value that I have brought with me here today.
Sure.
But a little bit of background about myself. My name is Andy Contiguglia. I am your corporate casual business attorney. I'm based in Denver, Colorado, and the owner and the founder of the Contiguglia law firm here in Denver. I focus on business law, corporate law, complex litigation, and risk management. I've been a lawyer for almost 30 years, believe it or not.
How
Man,
about
I've been
that?
practicing law since the mid-90s. That'll age me here real quick. I really like to assist startups, entrepreneurs, and other established businesses, helping them navigate legal landscapes and ensuring their success and compliance with the law. So that's what I do.
Very good. The title of your book suggests that there are some deficiencies when there's a new or business or a startup for an entrepreneur. Can you share what might be a common deficiency?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I would sort of preamble all of this with, everybody I talk to has a different issue with the starting up of their business. And as I talk to these people, they get, they're in various stages of their startup. Either they're at the very, very beginning and they're just trying to pick a name, or they're halfway through, they're hiring their first employee, they're looking to grow and scale, whatever it is. Everybody is always in this different stage of growth, we'll call it.
Sure.
But I think when you're starting a new business, you really need to, choose the right business entity, making sure you are picking whether you want to be a corporation or an LLC, making sure you properly register your business, ensuring that you file all the necessary paperwork with your local state, obtaining any required licenses and things that you have in that respect. Drafting any foundational documents, things like operating agreements, bylaws for corporations, partnership agreements with your business partners, obtaining any necessary permits and licenses. So, many industries require you to have permits and licenses. So that's another thing that you need to sort of check off on your list to make sure that you are in compliance. One big thing that I see a lot of businesses messing up on is not keeping their business bank account and their personal bank account separate. It is so very important, man. We could go on for an hour about keeping your business and personal finances separate. That is a key component, because in litigation, which I do a lot of, when I'm either defending a corporation or a business or bringing a lawsuit against a business owner, one thing I'm looking at is the liability component of things. And if you are commingling your business and your personal assets and your finances with one another, that exposes you as a business owner what's called piercing the corporate veil, or alter ego identification, meaning your personal assets can be attached or gone after, to really simplify it, by somebody who is suing you. And so one of the requirements here is making sure that you keep those things that are personal, and those things that are business. A really great example is, don't go buy your groceries for the week with the money from your business account. That is huge. And then another one, that the last thing I think, is making sure that you are complying with your local employment laws, whether they're the federal ones or the ones from your state. Quick story real quick. I received about 3 weeks ago a notice from here in the state of Colorado looking at an unemployment audit for my business. Now, I'm smart enough to know how to classify people who work for me.
Sure.
And there are like 19 different factors that the state looks at, that the IRS looks at, that the Federal Department of Labor looks at, in terms of classifying your workers as whether they are employees or independent contractors. And if you misclassify the people who work for you, you could be subject to penalties and fines because you misclassified your workers. So that's a really, really important factor that I see a lot of business owners messing up. I think people want to cut corners and they say, oh, I'm just going to hire all of these independent contractors to come in and do this work for me. And the next thing you know, they're being audited by the Department of Labor saying, hey, you misclassified these workers. They should have been employees, and now you owe extra unemployment, or now you owe extra taxes for other components of it. So that's another huge piece of this. And then I think one thing that just came into effect just recently, we've got issues with non-compete agreements now. The Federal Trade Commission is putting the kibosh on non-competes for workers who are working for you. So you can't do that anymore. So those are sort of out the window. And then you also have the Financial Crime Enforcement Network, FinCEN. Everybody who owns more than 20% of a business is required to register their business as a beneficial ownership interest in their business with the Financial Crime Enforcement Network. That just went into effect last year. It started this year. It was passed last year and went into effect this year, 2024, requiring businesses that were in effect prior to 2024 to make sure that they get their beneficial ownership interest filed with FinCEN before the end of this year. And then any new business that is started in 2024 has to get their beneficial ownership interest done within 90 days of starting their business. So Ben, I'll ask you, have you made your beneficial ownership interest filing with the Financial Crime Enforcement Network yet?
Yeah, I'll plead the fifth on that one. Yes, I will.
That works for me.
Yeah,
So we'll
okay.
just say, don't forget to do that. And I think that's something
Okay,
that
yes.
everybody needs to do. That's,
Mhm,
that's right up there with making sure you register your business and get all the necessary paperwork filing. What we're doing
mhm,
now with consulting with all our businesses and our clients is making sure that they are managing, this is just one more thing that they have to do
mhm,
as they start up their business.
mhm. Very good. I can appreciate that. When you said the non-competing, that went out the window, so you're not obligated to sign anything once you leave the corporation or the business. How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. What you see a lot here is when people join businesses, they are under contract, and part of
Mhm,
those contracts include non-compete agreements, meaning
right.
if you leave a company,
Mhm,
you are prohibited from working in working for another company that competes directly or indirectly with the
right.
one that you just left.
Right.
That was a pretty common thing
Yes,
that
yes, it
many
was.
companies were trying to do to keep people from competing against it. So think of it. Here you go, Ben. You join this company. You're the smartest person in your industry. And the next thing you know, you leave because you got a better offer from someplace. They're going
Mhm,
to pay you more money. They're in the exact same lane as the company that you left. And now that company wants to make sure that you can't bring your knowledge to their competitor. And so
gotcha. Yeah.
people would try, I'd say businesses would try to, pigeonhole people into not working for
Mhm,
competitors.
mhm,
That law morphed into really, you can't do that. You can only do that with people who are like business owners. So if you and I co-own a business together and I'm buying you out, I can then put you under a non-compete. But the Federal Trade Commission has now put some really significant limitations, or I should say exceptions to the general rule, which is non-compete agreements are unenforceable. And interesting you bring
mhm,
that up. I just wrote like the fourth volume of sort of a four-piece on this Federal Trade Commission
mhm,
regulation that just went into effect on my blog at
mhm.
contiguglia.com/blog. And it's in there. It's one of the newest ones as of, what's today's date? July 9th,
Yes,
2024.
yes. Well, good for you. Well, things are fluid. Things do change, and I can see that you got to stay on top of those things. Earlier, you mentioned about an LLC or a corporation. I know one fellow that I'm thinking about. He just couldn't make up his mind. Should it be an LLC or S corporation? How do you determine?
That's a good question. And I really like to tell people what they need to do is include their tax advisor in
Ah, okay.
this discussion.
Yeah.
And so while a lawyer can advise you how to go about filing your company, whether it should be a corporation, whether it should be an LLC, the way they operate and the way that they're managed are two very different ways.
Mhm,
LLCs tend to be much more loosely run, and I see people running their LLCs with co-owners, and it runs sort of like a partnership. It's very easy to manage.
mhm,
People both get an equal say typically in the way that the company is run and operated. I tell other people, listen, you want to be, put on your big kid pants, then go be a corporation. I
mhm.
see corporations getting a more mature look than LLCs typically do. And I
Uh,
see LLCs, and I typically recommend LLCs for like a single venture versus a corporation that might be a little bit bigger. Now, when you're
okay.
talking about like this S corp designation, that is a tax filing designation.
Mhm,
And what that means is you're going to be what's called flow through taxation. So when you create a corporation, it's automatically a C corporation
mhm.
unless you
Ah,
classify it with the IRS as an S corporation, meaning you are
mhm,
requesting that the IRS tax you as a partnership, meaning you have flow through taxation versus the double taxation that you don't get as a corporation. Now, LLCs can also elect to be taxed as S corps. Otherwise, they're taxed as a disregarded entity by the IRS. So that's why I always tell people bring in your tax advisor in that respect to decide, hey, how do you want to do this? Now,
mhm.
let's just simplify this one more step.
All
I
right.
like to say you've got either the double taxation or the flow through taxation.
Mhm,
My advice to my clients is typically, do you want to grow your wealth? all right, the money that you take home, or do you want to grow the value of your company?
Mhm.
If you want to grow the value of the company, keep the money in the company and keep it as a C corporation, pay yourself a salary, pay the taxes on the money that you get as your salary,
Mhm.
and then let the corporation pay its taxes on the money that it receives. But you keep the money in the corporation at that standpoint, and then you can have this opportunity to grow the corporation versus all the money that your company receives, you need to pay to yourself or you need to spend somehow.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to be taxed on the revenue that the company receives, whether you actually put it in your pocket or not. So if you
Mhm.
make
Mhm.
$100,000 in your company, but you pay yourself 50,000 of that, and you leave 50,000 in the bank for future operations, whatever those might be, you are going to be taxed for $100,000 of
Mhm.
revenue generated that year rather than the 50,000 that you actually paid yourself.
Gotcha.
So again,
Yeah.
it's very important that you include your tax planner in this discussion about what your goals and objectives are,
Mhm.
because it's not clear cut with everybody. Everybody's goals and objectives are different, Ben. You may
Mhm.
have goals that you want to grow your company, and for me, I want to take home as much money as I possibly can,
Absolutely.
and your goals and my goals are different, so there isn't a one size fits all. So the
Exactly.
important thing is here, make sure you sit down with your lawyer, make sure you sit down with your tax advisor and come up with a plan that works appropriately for you.
Very good. Yeah. Well, that really calls for a well-seasoned CPA or financial fellow to really guide you through all, because there are so many nuances to what we do. Every business is just a little different, a little different.
Absolutely.
Then you touched on it earlier. You touched on agreements. I know you speak very strongly about making sure you have a clear and enforceable contracts, but you also speak about critical clauses that should be included. Could you touch on that?
Absolutely. So when we're talking about contracts,
Mhm.
yeah, I tell people all the time, do you have a contract? Do you have a contract? And people like to tell me, oh, we have a handshake deal, or there's emails going around back
Yeah.
and forth, and it drives me up the wall because,
Mhm.
the problem that people don't realize is bad contracts are still enforceable, and you might be getting yourself into a contract when you least expect it. A contract does not have to be in writing, with the exception of certain types of contracts under the statute of frauds, which I think is a little bit beyond the scope of what we need to talk about. You can reach an agreement with somebody just by talking to them, shaking hands, patting each
Mhm.
other on the back, giving one another a hug, kiss it, whatever, however you want to do that. You are going to create these contracts. And the thing about contracts is, they're essential because they outline the rights and the responsibilities of all the parties involved. And
Mhm.
when you have a good, clear contract, it prevents misunderstandings. So think of how many times you've had a discussion with somebody. And then you come back 2 weeks later and you're like, hey, remember that discussion that we had the other day?
Yeah. Remember.
I said A, B, and C, and you go, no,
Mhm.
you didn't. You didn't say that. You said
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z. That's not what we talked about at all. Now you have
Mhm.
this completely misunderstanding. It doesn't even have to be over a contract. Heck, it could be over, what you were watching on TV last
Right.
week.
Oh, yes.
Whatever it is,
Yeah.
whatever misunderstanding you might have. So you put your contracts in writing. And that's the nice thing about having contracts in writing is it prevents these misunderstandings. And it also gives you legal recourse in the event that you have a dispute with somebody over the contract. I think that is really a key component here.
Mhm.
In service based contracts, I think it's really important to clearly define the scope of work. So, what services or goods are going to be provided by the services that you are engaging with somebody, and also their obligations of paying you. All right. So, payment terms, yeah, scope of work, what I'm going to do, payment terms, what you're going to do when you pay me.
Right.
So, the specific amounts are owed to me, specific due dates of when those payments are going to be made, penalties for late payments, that kind of stuff. You also have to look at trade secrets, protection of sensitive information. So, confidentiality provisions, I think, are really, really important. So, if you and I are sitting down and we're talking about your podcast and you're giving me all this information to, cut and splice your podcast episodes, but I'm learning a lot about what you do, that might be something you want to keep confidential. You don't want sensitive information being passed passed on to everybody else. Or if you have something proprietary as to your, brand per se, you don't want somebody running off with that. And in service-based industries, you see that, especially in marketing companies, they may have specific ways that they do their job that you don't want to be passed on to other people. I think that's really important. Another important clause, dispute resolution. What happens when you guys no longer get along, or what happens if you have a dispute in your agreement? So it's nice to determine ahead of time how disputes will be handled if they happen in the future. So you're looking at things like an arbitration clause or a mediation clause, or whether you're just going to allow people to go ahead and file for litigation and start a lawsuit right out of the gambit. So that's something to think about as well.
I think so.
You are listening to your Lot and Parcel Podcast. We invite you to tell a friend and to leave a rating and your commentary. We thank you in advance.
We are visiting with a business attorney who has captured the attention of many media outlets, such as Business.com, 5280 Magazine, Epic Times, CBS News Denver, and, not to mention, your Lot and Parcel show. He believes that business owners can be more successful in their business if they maintain a more detailed understanding of legal issues they may encounter while running their businesses. Therefore, he is providing original success strategies for business proprietors. And to reach out to him for business advisement, the link is in the show notes. Let's get back with our counselor, Andrew J. Contiguglia. Do non-disclosure agreements, do they really hold up, Andrew?
Non-disclosure, confidentiality, absolutely they do. So you see that a lot when it comes to intellectual property and things like that. So hiring others to, do the work for you for your branding, and you're giving them protected information. You want to make sure that they're not running off and using it with somebody else.
Exactly.
And if you have a special trade secret about your processes and your procedures, absolutely, those are enforceable. So confidentiality is an important one. Non-disclosure agreements, you don't want your information going off to other people either. Like in my industry as a lawyer, I have people coming in, but they are learning a lot about their clients. They're learning a lot about the operations of my business. And in that process, I may want to limit what my employees can do with that information if they decide they want to leave. Now, many industries change quickly, and so you might not need to hold somebody to a non-disclosure agreement for a real long period of time, but I don't think it's uncommon to hold somebody accountable for at least a year. And I think it also depends on how long they've been with you to see how what that's going to look like moving forward.
Right. Yeah, it can vary. I can see that. Now, you also touch on common compliance issues that sometimes business owners will or might overlook. What might that be?
Let's take a moment to acknowledge the importance of legal knowledge in the business world. Legal issues can be a minefield, but they don't have to be. That's why I am thrilled to introduce you to a resource that will be your guiding light through these challenges. Get ready to discover the ultimate legal companion for entrepreneurs. I am excited to introduce you to Don't Skip the Legal, the startup guide for entrepreneurs and business owners, your ultimate companion for conquering the legal challenges of entrepreneurship. It is authored by me, Andy Contiguglia, a seasoned business lawyer based here in Denver, Colorado. This book is your roadmap to navigating the legal landscape with confidence. Inside, you'll find valuable insights on choosing the right business entity, understanding fiduciary duties, tackling financing options, hiring employees, and even nailing down the perfect business name and location. But that's not all. You can get your hands on this essential guide in both Kindle and paperback form, making it super convenient for you. If you're ready to empower your business with knowledge, head over to Amazon, head over to Kindle, and grab your copy of Don't Skip the Legal today. For more details and updates, visit don'tskipthelegal.com, and don't let the legal hold you back in succeeding in business. With Don't Skip the Legal, the startup guide for entrepreneurs and business owners, you can take your business to new heights. Available on Amazon and Kindle. Now let's get back to the pod.
I mentioned one of these earlier, and that was misclassifying employees as independent contractors,
Gotcha.
or
Yeah.
really as classifying employees as independent contractors.
Mhm.
There's, the IRS and your local Department of Labor, they are going to scrutinize this. I remember, I just literally yesterday, my company was audited on this for work that we did
Mhm.
in 2023. Not a big deal because I had no independent contractors working for me last year. Everybody who worked for me in 2023 were actual employees of mine, with
Mhm.
the exception of my bookkeeper, but she's not a lawyer, right? I had a cleaning crew come in and help clean my offices. They are independent contractors.
Mhm.
So when you are looking at the people who are in your business, Ben, it's really important to make sure that the people you are classifying as independent contractors are really those. The true independent contractor really is the plumber who comes in to fix your toilet, because you're not in the toilet fixing business. You are in the business and podcasting business. But if you were to hire somebody as an independent contractor to, say, write content for your blog, that could create problems for you because you are in the industry of sort of marketing and podcasting. And that could be seen as somebody who is generating the work that you would otherwise be doing.
Exactly.
That is going to be problematic. And so it's going to be
Mhm.
important that you keep those separate. And I like to tell people, if you're paying another company, that's very helpful. But again, it is a case by case basis. And it doesn't matter how you decide you want to classify the people who work for you. What matters is how the Department of Labor wants to classify them. And they are going to go through 19 different factors to determine whether that person who's working for you is an employee or an independent contractor. And the burden is going to be on you to prove that they
Exactly.
were employees. I
Yeah.
think another big one nowadays is data privacy,
Ah.
failing to comply with the GDPR or the CCPA. These are, disclosure requirements and data protection requirements, where if I am gathering information from people who visit my website, I have an obligation to keep that data private. And, what I like to tell people is, if you are asking people's information to subscribe to your newsletter,
Mhm.
you really only need an email address. There's no reason that you collect a mailing address, a credit card number, or anything like that. So only collect the data that you need to provide the service that you are going to be providing to them.
Mhm.
So if it's an opt-in for, the delivery of a white paper, all you need to do is take get an email address. You don't really need anything more than that. Then, of course, the GDPR and the CCPA, Colorado has a version of this as well. If there's a data breach, you have obligations to notify everybody as well. So there's a lot that goes into there. And if people are
Mhm.
generating, I've drafted GDPR and CCPA policies on websites before, and there's a lot that goes into it about the disclosure requirements if there is a data breach, and the amount of information that you're really allowed to collect from people. So that's an important component of this.
Interesting. My goodness. Well, like I said earlier, there's so many things you have to consider. Then you have to consider, what's involved in registering a trademark. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, trademark registration. I like to look at trademarks and copyrights sort of in the same genre of
Okay.
legal tasks that we do.
All right.
Think of your trademark as sort of your brand. You're
Mhm.
right. Your brand is what defines you. And what I see a lot of people wanting to do is they start this new business and they automatically want to go out there and say, I want to trademark my name. And we got to look at it. We got to go, here's the deal. Trademarking, you don't just automatically get. You have to show that you are engaging in a business and that your name has created some unique component of your identity. And it has to be, in some form or fashion related to the work that you do. That requires you to actually do work in your industry and create a brand within, using your name. um
Mhm.
and you don't just automatically get this. And so when you file for a trademark, there's two ways that you can go about it. You can either file it and say, hey, we're already using this. And then you have to convince the trademark office that you're actually using it. Or if people want to protect their name, thinking that they're going to try to trademark it in the future, they can file what's called an intent to use, which is a different section of the trademark registration laws,
Hmm.
saying, hey, we are intending to use this as a trademark later on down the line. And the nice thing is, under those circumstances, it kind of puts this um, block in place to say nobody else can use it because you're first in time under those circumstances. And then you get 6 months to show the trademark office that you've managed to use it in the course and scope of your business. And if you don't within 6 months, you can extend it for another 6 months. And then if you don't do within that, 6 months, you can extend it another 6 months. So you can extend it on 6 month intervals, this intent to use for a period up to 3 years, if you don't already have it in place. And then it's up to you to convince the trademark office that you deserve trademark protection. And there's a number of different factors that go into that. You compare that to like copyright. Those are things when you are generating something
Sure.
or, on your website, the content that you create, the books that people write,
Right.
the images that they take and they're putting up on the design of their website, all of that can be copyrighted. And that's usually an artistic, anything that's sort of put in a tangible medium that is generated by a human.
Mm-hmm.
And the legal arguments that are coming up nowadays as it relates to copyright law is, did a human create this or did an AI create this?
Mm.
A lot of marketing companies nowadays are using artificial intelligence to create images. They're creating blog content. They're creating content for websites, whatever it might be. And then people trying to go and generate copyright protection on the things that AI is creating. And the
Mm.
Copyright Office won't let you do that. Early last year, the Copyright Office started asking whether AI was used in any portion of the generating of the content that you're trying to copyright. And if it was, the Copyright Office won't allow you to copyright that. So you
Wow.
need to
Mm.
really take a look at this, and or if you can somehow, and here's sort of the argument that lawyers are making nowadays when they challenge decisions by the Copyright Office. They're saying like, well, yeah, but you don't get this result unless the prompt that I put in is an appropriate prompt.
Mhm.
And so, what we tell people is keep track of the prompts and the discussion that you're having with your AI to show that there was a form of human involvement in that. But I think that's a real hard argument to make. And I've yet to really see the Copyright Office latch onto that and agree with it. And until the case law gets fleshed out a little bit better in that space, I think you're going to see the Copyright Office pushing away things that are AI generated for copyright protection. Now, does that mean you can't use AI to create, content? Absolutely not. Just means you can't copyright it.
Right. Very good. Um, Not using the AI for an example, it's all original. It's you did it. You were very creative. How do you monitor and enforce your, well, let's say a trademark?
Well,
Right.
you
Mhm.
have a requirement to when you trademark your brand's name and your logo, you'll have an
Right.
obligation to enforce it, which means when you see your trademarked material being used elsewhere, you have to send people who are infringing on your mark what we
Right.
refer to as either takedown notices or um, you know demand for compliance, that kind of thing, to say, listen, you're doing that because your failure to protect your trademark
Mhm.
can result in you losing the trademark.
Uh,
And
okay.
there are a
Yeah.
number of organizations out there that will sort of keep an eye on your trademark for you. There are other things that you can do, real simple things. Put in like a Google alert with your name and see what starts popping up in various places so you can keep track of that. It's important to search for infringements. In various markets, online platforms, and as I said, there
Mhm.
are companies that will do that for you. Their trademark watch services
Mhm.
that'll give you alerts for potential violations. And then, as I mentioned, it's important that you send cease and desist letters to pursue legal action in the event you come across people who are infringing upon your marks or your copyrighted images. One problem that I see coming up all the time is I get calls from my clients who are like, "Hey, I just received this letter from, this company saying that we have an unlicensed image up on our website." I'm like, "Okay, well, where'd you get this image?" "Oh, I went to Google search and this
Mhm.
image came up in the search." And I'm like, "And you
Oh,
just kind of cut and pasted it and threw it into your website?" "Yeah, it's
huh.
exactly what I did."
Okay.
Isn't that like, you
Yeah.
know, common
Yeah.
domain? I'm like,
Yeah.
no, we need to find out who owns you don't have a license for that. This happened to me. I am subscribed to a licensing service, so
Mhm.
I have access to items that are licensed, but you have to look at the licensing agreements, because some of the licensing agreements that you get through various companies only allow you to use those images one time, and they only
Mhm.
allow you to use images for your items. But what if you're a content creator and you now download an image and you're using it on somebody else's platform for stuff that you created? Now you've got this problem where my website is being dinged for copyright infringement because, Ben, you created a blog post for me with an image that you had licensed for you, but not for me. And so you have to
Mhm.
look at the scope of these licensing agreements to make sure that what you're creating for me doesn't hurt me. And if I end up having to pay a fine on that, who do you think I'm going to come after, Ben, for that?
Exactly. Exactly.
Those are, I think, are really important factors to take into
Mhm.
consideration.
Absolutely. On my podcast show, of course we implement music and so forth, but my producer makes sure that in fact we have a subscription to make sure that we have the rights to use that music,
Absolutely.
and does this principle also apply in securing domain names?
It does. I think you
Okay.
can, you look at situations, and this was happening early on in,
Mm,
when people were getting names. I remember I represented a local car dealership here in Denver. This was probably about, when was it, early 2000s, so about
mm,
20 years or so ago, when domain names were just starting to sort of come about and people were doing it, and somebody bought the domain name for my client, and was like, cyber squatting on their name, saying, "Well, we're not going to give it back to you unless you pay us $10,000."
mm,
And of course, that kind of thing still happens. You go out there and you look and you find people squatting on different names. And so you have to bring what's called a UDRP action against those people for cyber squatting. And you can do that. The UDRP is a Uniform Dispute Resolution policy act that you bring in a specialized administrative court,
mhm.
which ultimately you get a ruling from them, which is ICANN, which is the international, or the organization that assigns the domain names to people when you buy them, and they'll transfer it over if you end up winning that. And part of that winning is showing that you have an identity in the name that they are looking to squat on.
Mhm.
So here's a really obscure example. Let's say I'm Michael Kors, and I am the developer and the creator of Beautiful Fashion, and I now find out that somebody has the michaelkors.com website, and I'm looking to go after it.
Mm.
Um, Now that person's going to have to say, "Yeah, but my name is also Michael Kors, and this is where it's spelled exactly the same way, but
Oh
this is where
boy.
I post all of my,
Yes.
videos and my images and my blog posts from my
Mm.
travels." That might be
Mhm.
different. But if my name is Andy Contiguglia and I have no relation to Michael Kors, but I'm trying to, you know, say something else, I may have a problem when it comes to the branding and the identity under those circumstances. So,
Wow. Yeah. Well, there's lots to consider. I'm telling you, and this is where you come in as well as your book. Your book covers all that. Am I
It
correct?
covers a lot of it, and I'm
Yeah.
actually there's some new things, as I mentioned. So it came out in early 2023.
Mhm.
Wrote it sort of over the holidays between 2022 and 2023, and even since I published it at the beginning of 2023, there's been a lot of changes with, um, the non-competes, and with the FinCEN, the Financial Crime Enforcement Network registration requirements that just
Right.
went into effect. So I'm in the process of adding a few things to it. But if you get the Kindle version, you sort of, the nice thing is you get sort of updated on that. But the book is called "Don't Skip the Legal." It's the legal guide for business owners and startups to, remain compliant in the law. And it kind of walks you through how to, everything you need to consider from the moment you start your company to the moment you want to sell it. You can find it on Amazon, but you can also go to don'tskipthelegal.com, and all my media and everything that I have on there, my videos and the different books and stuff, you can access it through there as well as my podcast, which we talk about a lot of these issues with business owners, and I sort of do case by case interviews with business owners about the legal issues that they've had to deal with in their busises.
What is the name of your podcast, Andrew?
It is the Don't Skip the Legal podcast.
Okay. Should have known.
We call this branding.
There you go. Yeah, it is. Yes, absolutely. Well, I congratulate you for that. I'm telling you, because I know there's so many out there sitting on the fence and just don't. Where do I start? And I think this is a good start. Acquiring your book. You also have a website, correct? Other than the.
Yep. I have the don'tskipthelegal.com, but then there's my law firm website, which is Contiguglia.com. Okay. And that is www.contiguglia.com. And on my website, you can find out a little bit more about me, as well as, do a search on our blog posts. We've got a lot of information on our blogs about various issues. So you can sort of put in your, whatever interests you as it relates to your business and throw it in there, and you'll get some good information. Then you're always welcome to reach out to me, and I'm happy to take some time to talk to people about their interests and their needs as well.
Very good, Andrew. I appreciate that. You're a good counselor. I'll make sure to put those emails in the description notes, as well as your podcast. So I'm very grateful for that, because as I indicated, I'm in my retirement years right now, but I started very early on as an entrepreneur. I've never been employed, never a W-2, Andrew, never.
Well, it's interesting because I've been an employee, and I've started my law firm twice. I started once right out of law school, and I hated it, and then I started it up again about 11 years later once I knew a little bit more about what I was doing. And I'm in the process of starting a new company right now. So all of these things that are going through, I'm trying to decide on a name for my new business. And I'm like, God, did I go through all this? No, making a law firm Contiguglia was really easy, but now I'm trying to go with something a little bit more branded and unique. So I'm looking at other names right now for this public relations firm that I'm starting.
So, public relations firm. Okay. Yeah. Very good. Congratulations. We'll be looking for that.
You bet.
Counselor, I enjoyed my visit with you. There's
likewise
plenty there that we can think about and ruminate about and learn from what you had to say, as well as your book. And I want to thank you, and I wish you the very best, Andrew.
Ben, it's always a pleasure. I appreciate you having me again on your podcast, and I look forward to future conversations with you.
Thank you for listening. The theme music has been provided by Echo Foxtone. All the opinions expressed in the podcast are opinions only and should not be relied on. For more information, please visit yourlotandparcel.org. We trust you will sponsor our informative podcast with your generosity. For more information, please visit yourlotandparcel.org.
Thank you for listening to the Don't Skip the Legal podcast. I'm your host, Andy Contiguglia. I hope you enjoyed our time together and this great opportunity to peek behind the business door and examine the legal lessons in business. If you're keen to hear how these lessons can be applied in the real world, well, join us next week for another episode where you can listen in to another business success story. As always, you can head over to contiguglia.com/podcast to sign up to our email list, as well as check out all the links and resources in our show notes. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at AJCESQ. Thanks again. This is Andy Contiguglia reminding you to don't skip the legal. Good luck. The legal information contained in this podcast is intended for general informational and entertainment purposes only. It should only be used as a starting point for addressing your specific legal issue. The legal information I talk about does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and me. This podcast is not a substitute for an in-person or telephonic consultation with a lawyer who is licensed to practice in your jurisdiction about your specific legal issue, and you should not rely on this legal information for those purposes. You understand that questions and answers or other information contained in this podcast are not confidential and are not subject to attorney-client privilege. I am not providing you a legal service. Every legal case is different, and past performance is not indicative of future results. Please consult your own attorney.